What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Fit Limiter Podcast. This is episode number 15. I'm your host, Zach Buchanan. Joining me as always, it's JP3, John Poole III. What's up, buddy?
Oh, not too much. What's up?
Well, it was undoubtedly one of the greatest weekends in motorsports in a long time, at least. I actually, a little off topic, tweeted something a couple of days back. It was more of like a challenge in spirit of the Super Weekend, and basically, if Max Verstappen won, I was gonna take a bath in Red Bull. If Elio won, I was gonna take a bath in milk, and if Chase Elliott won the Coke 600, I was gonna take a bath in Mountain Dew. I tweeted a video of it, and it got like 11,000 views or something like that in like 2 days. Actually, Chase Elliott liked the tweet, so I thought that was kind of cool. But
Nice.
yeah, thankfully, as you guys will find out, none of those drivers won, so I didn't have to take any non-water baths. So jumping right into things, stop and go. John Poole, what do you got for us?
So unfortunately, after Monday night's recording, we learned that F1 great Niki Lauda has passed away at the age of 70.
So Walter Wolf, who was the first Canadian team owner in Formula One competition, is wanted for a conspiracy to attack the Slovenian government. It was an arms-related bribery scandal that recently helped bring down the Slovenian government.
So ISC is set to merge with NASCAR. NASCAR has offered ISC a $2 billion merger agreement. This would mean that each ISC shareholder, including myself, would receive $45 per share.
So, the NASCAR 2020 Hall of Fame class was announced, and in that class it includes Tony Stewart, Joe Gibbs, engine builder Waddell Wilson, Buddy Baker, and Bobby Labonte.
So we have some new team news, surprisingly. Entrepreneur Matt Hurley today has announced the formation of a new NASCAR team known as H2M Racing that will start in the Xfinity Series, with sponsorship from, I believe this is the most eye-opening of things, Circuit City. Shane Lee will be their driver, and the car will be a Toyota.
Some news out of the IndyCar world. IndyCar partners with Red Bull Advanced Technologies to create an aeroscreen next year. Remember, PPG was working on a windscreen for IndyCar. We also have the advanced frontal protection system that is installed on the IndyCars today.
So some news coming from Bob Pockrass. NASCAR's John Probst says there was positive feedback from the splitter that they used in the All-Star race. It was a single-piece carbon fiber splitter, and it will likely be on the 2021 Gen 7 car. Now the hood ducts they like, but they're possibly going to move those around to help with sponsorship, allow that to be a little bit more natural for teams and companies.
So it was announced that SMI's, Speedway Motorsports Incorporated, is exploring a doubleheader with IndyCar. Of the venues that were discussed, those included are Charlotte Roval, the Fall Texas race, and a Las Vegas fall race.
So some news coming from Adam Stern. It seems like over the weekend, during the 500, IndyCar was hosting 5 potential engine manufacturers not currently in the series, as they're trying to land their third engine manufacturer. They had deep talks, as we've discussed before, with Porsche a few months back, but they are unsure where Porsche is currently in the talks, where they're standing at, per se.
So Fiat Chrysler Automobiles is set to align with Renault and Nissan, which could be very big for the future of their involvement with racing.
So the first race of the weekend kind of the first race of the weekend that kicked it all off, at least on the IndyCar side, was the Freedom 100 for Indy Lights. Crazy pace laps. We had Jared Andretti and somebody else, David Malakis, Aaron Telitz, broke a half shaft during pacing. And then once we got underway, we had a huge accident with David Malakis and Chris Wyndham. But in the end, Oliver Askew, with the last lap, last corner pass on Ryan Norman, won the Freedom 100 by 28 thousandths of a second.
That wasn't even a last turn pass. That was a last second pass. That was impressive.
And, 28 ten-thousandths of a second. My apologies.
So, the Hoosier 100, it was the final Hoosier 100 that was ran at the Indiana State Fairgrounds, as that is now being reconfigured. And Tyler Courtney took home the victory.
So NASCAR had the Xfinity Series and the Cup Series at Charlotte this weekend. Xfinity kicked it off on Saturday. Incredible temperatures during Saturday's race. Ambient temperature at around 94 degrees for the race. Many drivers were complaining about heat exhaustion. Austin Dillon had to be pulled from his race car and replaced with Daniel Hemrick with blisters that he was developing on his ribcage. But in the end, Tyler Reddick for RCR pulls off another victory this season.
So the Little 500 was Saturday night, and for those of you that don't know what the Little 500 is, it is a asphalt sprint car race on the quarter mile at Anderson Speedway. 33 cars, they start 3 wide, it's 500 laps, and for the third time in his career, Cody Swanson dominates and takes home the victory.
So the greatest day in motorsports kicked off with Formula One at Monaco. It was an action-filled race. We had drama with Charles Leclerc falling out early with his own issues. Then we had a car park at Rascasse. Then we also had the drama of Lewis Hamilton driving tires that were way beyond their limit. But in the end, Lewis Hamilton held off Max Verstappen for the victory, but Verstappen was demoted to 4th place after contact in the pit lane with Valtteri Bottas. So the podium was Lewis Hamilton, Sebastian Vettel, and Valtteri Bottas.
It was the 103rd running of the Indianapolis 500 Sunday afternoon, and it did not disappoint. I was personally there for that race, sat in the South Vista between turns 1 and 2, and it was fantastic. Simon Pagenaud started on pole and just continued to dominate. Colton Herta was knocked out early with a gearbox problem. Only 4 cautions on the race, including a big crash with, I believe it was 21 laps to go, 20 laps to go, somewhere around there. 5 cars were involved, including Graham Rahal and Sebastian Bourdais. And a last lap duel, actually really last 5-10 lap duel between Alexander Rossi and Simon Pagenaud. It was Simon Pagenaud that took home the victory, and it was his first Indianapolis 500 victory.
So the final race of this super day of racing was the Coca-Cola 600 for NASCAR. It was a crazy one, to say the least. We had the most cautions that we've had in a Coke 600 since the infamous 2005 Coca-Cola 600. No one driver had the dominant car, I would say, throughout the night. But when it was all said and done, the dust settled. Martin Truex Jr. wins his second 600 in 3 years.
After a tire failure of all things.
I mean, it was not even a small one. He hit the wall hard.
Yeah. Of course, you consider these Gen 6 cars, bodywork damage, that's huge. Aero damage, especially with this package. So that was impressive.
Absolutely.
So, Tuesday Trivia's back.
Oh boy.
Mr. Poole, we're going to put you to work. See what you know, see what you remember.
Oh God.
So it's been a while since a driver in the IndyCar Series has won the Indianapolis 500 and the IndyCar Series Championship in the same season. When was the last time that this happened, and what was the driver?
So let me think. It's gonna be mid-2000, or it's gonna be late 2000s. I'm gonna guess it's a Team Chip Ganassi driver. I'm thinking it's either Dixon or Dario, personally. Actually, no. I'll take that back. It's either Dixon, Dario, or Hornish. I know it's one of those three. Let me think. I think I'm going to go with Scott Dixon. His win in 2008 was probably the last time it happened.
Close. 2010, Dario.
Okay, so see, I was close. It was either one of those two.
Yeah, actually, we had a string of basically if you won the 500, you won the championship that season. 2005, it was Dan Weldon who won both. 2006, Hornish won both. 2007 and 2008. 2007 it was Franchitti who won both, and then 2008 Scott Dixon won both, and then 2010 he did the same thing. So yeah, that was basically if you won the 500, you were basically destined to win the championship. So that was pretty cool to see.
Absolutely.
So the reason I bring that up is because the Indy 500 was incredible, and the month of May was definitely Simon Pagenaud's. And when you think of his resurgence, and it not just his career, but at Penske too, winning the GP, winning the pole, and now winning the 500. I mean, it's definitely fair to say that he's a legitimate title contender now.
Yeah, did you hear what Roger Penske announced from Victory Lane?
Yes, he's going nowhere. He's going to be back with the team long term. So that's awesome. He's safe. He's actually the points leader now by 1 point over Newgarden. So
wow.
Yeah, because they were doing a points breakdown throughout the race, and they still had Newgarden as the points leader. So it's actually pretty cool that, but all things considered, Indy is a double points race. So, that's not surprising, but at the same time, if he keeps up this, I mean, think about 2016. He got on such a roll in 2016, and it just snowballed from there, and which led him to his first championship.
Absolutely.
And if anything like that happens again, watch out. I mean, because he'd go on a tear and win a championship again. But they gotta stay on this roll, and it's harder to do because that was back in an era where you had the aero kits and track position was key, qualifying was important. They had the Chevy aero kit; it was a Penske car, so it was. I don't want to say it was easy, but it was. He had what was it? 3 other teammates to beat back then.
Mm-hmm.
And that was really what you're battling for in terms of the championship. And he got the job done back then. But, you look at who he's going to have to beat this year. You got Newgarden 1 point back. You got Rossi, who is 22 points back. And then you've got Sato, who's 47 points back. Dixon is also 47 points back. So you've got 5 drivers who are within a race of each other.
Yeah.
And if we're just thinking of who's been the strongest this year, who's been on top of their game this year, those are probably the 5 guys that would come to mind. Sato has had really a breakout year, and it's really surprising because he's so late into his career, so late into his racing career. I mean, he's in his 40s.
Yeah.
So it almost reminds you of Roberto Moreno, what he did with Patrick Racing in 2000. When he went on to, I believe he won 2 races and actually led the points for a while. What Sato has done has been impressive, especially with his win at Barber. Scott Dixon finished, I believe, 17th in the 500, and
yes.
he got beat by Pippa Man. I just wanted to throw that out there.
But the thing is looking back at some of the replays that we saw from the 500, he actually got front end and rear end damage. So I'm just assuming that he was probably just holding on.
Yeah, I'm not gonna hold that against him by any means. I was actually really surprised that the car wasn't there for him because Dixon's usually somebody you think of that is at least in the top 5, top 10 at Indy.
Well, if the cautions fell a little bit differently there on Sunday, he would have been there because he was getting like ridiculous fuel numbers compared to everybody else.
Yeah, definitely. And you look at the finish. Pagenaud, Rossi, Sato, Newgarden, top 4. Those are the top 4 guys in the championship right now.
Yes.
You look at Power, came back from a pit lane penalty to finish 5th. Santino Ferrucci, who mowed the grass to avoid that 5-car accident with
7.
was it 7? I mean, there's 5 that actually crashed.
Yeah, 5 that actually crashed there. I think it was.
I think 7 total had contact though.
Yeah, it was crazy.
A wicked crash. Actually, very lucky that it wasn't a worse crash. But Ferrucci comes home 7th. Connor Daly, who ran as high as 4th at one point. I mean, late in the race was running 4th. Got swallowed on the restart, but he finishes 10th. His best 500 finish in an Andretti car. Really showed what he can do if he's given the right opportunity. So that was great to see for him. How about Hinchcliffe coming from 32nd on the grid to finish 11th?
James Davison finishing 12th for
after getting wrecked.
After getting wrecked, Dale Coyne, Bird, Bilardi.
No, it was Foyt, Bilardi, Bird.
No, it was with Dale Coyne this year.
Oh, it was. Okay.
Yes.
My mistake. I guess it was with Foyt last year.
And look at the 2 Dreyer Reinbold cars finishing 19th and 20th. 1 lap off, but still.
I mean, you look at Karam, especially with the handling problems he had in qualifying starting 31st. I mean, that's not a bad finish for them. And how about really the story of the week, or at least of the race, I would say, or one of the stories of the race. Pippa Mann driving for a USAC team. In their first Indianapolis 500, they finished 16th.
Yeah, on the lead lap.
The fact they're on the lead lap was incredible. You've got Elio, who finished a lap down with his. He was actually a part of that accident with Davison.
I will say the biggest surprise of the 500 was Marco Andretti.
Yeah, man.
Biggest surprise.
Yeah.
5 laps off the pace, last car running.
I believe, they said something about his handling was poor from the start. I just don't know how they missed it that bad. Especially it's an Andretti car.
Yeah, I mean, there were points in the race where he was 20 miles an hour off pace.
Yeah,
like
and
he was running 205s.
Yeah, I mean, at that point, he was just in the way.
Yeah.
It was really like Davison last year when he had his crash with Sato. It's like, they need to get him off the track. It's dangerous just to have him out there. But I was disappointed. I was more disappointed for the fact that it was, it was Mario's 50th anniversary of his win. He was running a throwback scheme to him. I loved that scheme. I wanted him to run well just because of that scheme, and it was sad to see that scheme be done like that, I guess.
Exactly. It was just, I think I joked, in our little discussion chat we had that I'm pretty sure he was running Mario's 69 car out there. That's how slow it was.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know how the handling could have been that bad and for him to be able to stay out there,
Yeah, quite frustrating to see at least, with Mario having his 50th anniversary and running that paint scheme, which was incredible to look at. It's just, I don't know, it was more disappointment than anything.
Right. So Colton Herta, who was probably one of the heartbreaks of the race, actually was knocked out. I believe the yellow flew at lap 6, but I believe he had his issue on lap 3 or 4 because he actually coasted around and was on the warm-up lane coasting to pit road, and it was basically when his car came to a stop that they threw the yellow. That was heartbreaking, man, because he was one of the best cars in traffic. Looking at practice, and his gutsy run in qualifying to put the car 5th is definitely somebody to watch out for, and it was unfortunate to see that happen for him.
Well, just taking a look at Harding Steinbrenner as a whole, I mean, since their win at COTA, they've had mechanical issues. Non-stop.
Terrible reliability.
I mean, it's Honda levels reliability bad.
Yeah.
I mean, he hasn't finished a race. He's had the speed. Every practice session, he's been fast. But he needs some reliability.
Yeah.
It's poor, to say the least.
I mean, I'm just saying, if they're... I hate to say it just because it would almost guaranteed to eliminate a team from IndyCar racing, but I'd say as soon as he can get his foot in the door in a dedicated Andretti car, he definitely got to take it because even though it's an Andretti prepared car at Harding Steinbrenner Racing, like you said, they've had terrible reliability, been so inconsistent. It's just one of those things where, he deserves better than that. And I know he's a rookie, and he'll find those opportunities at some point. But yeah, I hate to see it for him.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. Since his win at Austin, where he was second in the points, he's finished last, second to last, second to last, last.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah.
And that puts him well down in the points to 16th.
Yeah.
Which, you look at the guys that he's ahead of still. He's ahead of Kanan, Laced, Marco. Marco really fell in the points after Sunday. Veach, Erickson, and then Chilton, who actually
missed the race.
This is interesting. Ed Carpenter has run one race. Max Chilton has run every other race this season other than Indianapolis. Ed Carpenter is ahead of him in the points.
Yeah, it just goes to show that Chilton I don't know what...
Carlin has not been very good this year.
They've shown flashes. But
yeah.
It's just...
I mean, Pato's been pretty decent, but...
I mean, Pato is punching above his weight in that car. Let's be honest.
Definitely. Also worth pointing out that that Pippa Mann, who has one start compared to Ben Hanley's 3 starts, is almost ahead of him in points as well.
Yeah. One thing that I have to comment about that wasn't really announced on the broadcast, but came out today was Veach isn't cleared yet. He actually got injured during his accident there on lap 176.
A knee injury, wasn't it?
Yeah, I believe it was a knee injury, so he's not cleared to drive. So, if he can't go for Detroit this week, which...
That's a tough race to be coming back from an injury
two
from.
races.
Two races, exactly.
To come back to... I mean, who do we see getting the nod? Connor Daly?
Dude, I hate to, wish for a driver to, not be able to race. But if there's one guy that deserves that opportunity, I mean, who else could you point out that deserves an opportunity like that?
Yeah, because
especially after his run. I mean, because there was a lot of situations, like, you remember, he was right on those restarts. He was right around Rossi and Servia when they had all that dicing up going on, Like, those were situations where he easily could have gotten into an accident.
Yeah.
And drove very skillfully throughout the day. So, I mean, if there's anybody that would deserve a shot in a car like that, I'd hate to see Zach Veach not be able to race Saturday and Sunday, but if there's a guy that deserves it, it's definitely Connor Daly.
Yeah, and from what I heard, Rob Edwards even tweeted him and said, "Come back anytime." He said he loved the way he approaches everything. So
yeah,
I think from an Andretti standpoint, that's who they're probably going to be targeting if Veach needs it, per se.
Right. And I hate that for Zach Veach because he's had such a rough season to start out. I mean, like, you look at last season, and it was a promising season for him. And you're thinking, all right, we could have another Rossi in the series. He's with Andretti. He had a pretty solid season, first season out. We could turn around and see him really turn into something here. And it's just been a sophomore slump for him. It's been kind of sad to see.
Yeah, it is kind of sad to see, but I'm not necessarily surprised. At least from what I saw. I mean, with Rossi, you would get, those flashes where you would see, okay, yeah, this is the driver that we know you are. With Veach, I just haven't seen that yet, personally. I just don't think that he's there yet.
Yeah. Which I hope the funding is still there for next year for him to prove that, because obviously still learning. So yeah, hopefully he gets that opportunity. One thing I want to talk about is the accident with Castroneves and Davison on pit road.
Yeah.
Elio kind of rode on his left rear down pit road in the transfer lane, but then he moved over. And then Davison was going to miss his box and basically stopped in the fast lane. And race control gave Elio a drive-through for that.
Yeah. Here's how I interpreted the accident. So Davison was worried about Elio swerving all about behind him and then just misread his pit stall.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what Elio was doing. I don't know why he was in the slow lane and then moved back over to the fast lane. But it was just, I don't know. And there's now talks with Elio that probably could have been his last 500.
Yeah. At least with Roger.
At least with Roger, because,
Yeah.
they're pursuing rumors that Rossi to Penske are, probably the worst kept secret in the paddock.
Right. Which I'd hate to see that for him, just because really last year he had an ill handling car in hot conditions where it was hard to pass. This year, had that incident early on, and sometimes you just can't come back from it. I think he was 2 laps down and came back to 1 lap down. So, I mean, pretty early on, he was out of it. The way I interpreted that accident, though, is, if they're both on their pit limiter, they're theoretically going the same speed. So, even if he's in that lane and then moves over, why worry about the guy behind you? It's if you get turning into your box, that's on you. But why stop in the fast lane? Like that's
It was probably something that just broke concentration. I mean,
yeah.
that's
It just looked like an
down.
accident to me. That's all I'm saying. It just looked like an accident. It looked like I believe we had an accident in the Cup Series on pit road, similar to that this year, where if you're in the fast lane, you can't pit from the fast lane. You need to get over to the transfer lane and then turn into your box. It's happened at Indianapolis before, where people will pit from the fast lane, or they'll come out of their box and go straight to the fast lane and cause an accident. I believe it was 2017 with Townsend Bell and Hunter Ray that happened.
Yeah.
So
I think Elio was involved in that one too. So.
Yeah, he didn't have anywhere to go. I think he got squeezed into the wall or something. I can't remember.
But getting back to Elio, I'll be honest with you. I just don't feel any remorse for Elio not coming back with RP. If you look at how he got the ride per se of the 3 car, the circumstances that he did, and then never acknowledged the driver that he, that was supposed to get that ride. That's still a sore sticking point for some fans.
Yeah.
And such like that. And then you have his whole tax invasion fiasco, which helped bring Will Power to IndyCar, which...
Well, he was already in IndyCar. He just didn't have the funding for the 09 season.
Yeah, but it basically guaranteed him a ride with Penske, which...
Yeah.
I was okay with. It did bring good, but just... Overall, I just think Elio, even though he's a fan favorite, can be a polarizing character, so... I think his time has come and passed, and it's just time to go sports car racing.
Yeah. Which, that's a good point about the whole Greg Moore thing. That's commonly overlooked, because Greg Moore was the guy. When they announced in 1999, I believe it was May of 1999, that they were going to have a driver lineup, because they only had one full-time driver, and that was Al Unser Jr. And, he wasn't getting it done. He was having his issues on and off the track. They didn't have a full-time driver in the 3 car, and then they signed Jill DeFerrin and Greg Moore. Greg Moore had his fatal accident, and Elio took that ride after Greg passed away. They had some contract issues, and basically in the haste of the short turnaround in the next season, trying to get everything in order, kind of overlooked the fact that Elio lives in Miami. Greg at that point was living in, I believe it was Toronto. Very different styles of living, different costs of living, which would make your taxes different. And, an oversight. But, yeah. I will say, Elio has been good for IndyCar racing, though. Just to have one of those drivers that people can look up to, the personality, the character that he is. It's the same as TK, Tony Kanaan. Even if TK sticks with Foyt for another couple years and doesn't really do anything, he always has the 500 that he's fast at, and it's just having him in the series. It just kind of, it's like, oh, hey, TK, like, I don't have a problem with him having a ride, just like I don't have a problem with Elio having a ride, even if it's not with Penske.
Yeah.
Because I think it's fair to say, if there's the funding for Rossi to go to Penske, so be it. I think it would be almost foolish at that point for him to leave Andretti, though, just considering he's always going to be the A driver there. There's no doubt about it. He will always be the A driver as long as he wants to be there. Because, he's been so fast with Andretti, and, it makes you wonder how would he be at Penske. But then again, just within that team, you've got so much competition between Joseph and Simon and Will. There's a lot of competition between those three drivers, and I almost feel like, maybe he wouldn't necessarily like having competition within his team because he doesn't have that with Andretti right now.
No, he doesn't. He has Hunter Ray to a very lesser extent. He has Veach. I can't think of anybody else.
I mean, you've got Marco, but he's just there. He's there because he owns the car.
Yeah, he owns the car, so he's
owns
there.
Part of the car.
And that's basically with Brian Herta, so that's...
Yeah.
Yeah, so he doesn't really have a teammate that can really...
Challenge him. Yeah, I feel like him and Penske, that would be kind of a sore relationship.
I mean, you could say the same about Scott. Basically, it's similar to Scott Dixon. It'd be like Scott Dixon leaving for Penske. I mean, he has his own thing with Chip, and Chip, he has no competition. I mean, now this season, it seems like he has a little bit better competition. Not, anything to write home about, but still better than what he's had, I'd say, since the DW12 era.
You make a good point with Dixon. You could almost say the same thing about Dixon and Ganassi, where it's almost you don't want to go to Ganassi because you know that your standard is Scott Dixon, and regardless of whether or not, there's always been that chatter that the 10 car isn't the same as the 9 car. That whether it's bad luck or the driver or the 9 car just has a little bit more than the 10 car. I don't know why it would be like that, but there's that standard that you're racing not only as a teammate with a 5-time champion and one of the all-time greats, but you're competing against him too. And Scott Dixon doesn't really seem like a guy you lean on for advice.
Yeah.
I could be wrong. I could be, I'm not trying to judge him as a character, but doesn't necessarily seem like a mentor. More like seems like a guy that kind of fends for himself from that aspect.
Yeah, for sure.
So the 500, one last thing I want to talk about with the 500, because I know there's some differing opinions on this. The crash that really set up the shootout to the finish between Graham Rahal and Sebastian Bourdais. There's a lot of differing opinions on this. I've got a strong opinion on it, but John, what did you see with that accident?
So, from looking at the interview and looking at interviews afterwards, here's what I took from it. It looked like to me that Bourdais, he was kind of a sitting duck. I'll give it that. And, Graham was getting the run, but then he stalled out almost as soon as he pulled out. But he was still there, but not enough there to where, he should be there. Bourdais,
almost like Wickens and Hunter Ray at Pocono last year.
Yeah, almost, but to a lesser extent. I'd say Wickens was there, but Graham wasn't necessarily as there as Robbie was last year at Pocono. So I think Sebastian turned in, gave him a little hip check, and then turned in afterwards. I mean, his interview afterwards, he felt so dejected. He said that wasn't what I was trying to do. It was one of those racing deals, I think, at that point. And I'm not sure where the spotters are. I don't know if they have spotters at the top of turn 3. I believe most of them are at turn 4. So if I
think they're in 1 and 3.
Okay, so if they are in 1 and 3, then I don't know. It's just misjudgment. I guess he thought that he was going to back out there.
Yeah.
But he didn't, and that's what caused the huge one. But, I was just shocked about some of the cars coming in there last second, just flying through there.
Yeah, I mean, like, you could see the smoke. Like, even on TV, you could see the smoke pretty early on, and it's like those guys are just barreling in there. I don't know if it's just cold tires, but you also think about it. When you're in a corner like that and you just kind of grab the brakes Uh, I'm surprised some of those guys would spin like that. You got to think it was cold tires, or they had a lot of weight jacker in it or something like that. Because for it to snap, you'd think they'd have, a pretty decent amount of rear brake bias. But for Indianapolis, when you're coming from 220 miles an hour into pit road, having a lot of rear brake bias would probably cause you to spin into pit road like we saw with Marcus Ericsson.
Yeah.
So it just kind of makes you wonder, what happened. But yeah, we got very lucky, I will say, because there's a couple crashes, a couple guys that spun in there that clipped other guys, and it could have easily been one of those where they ramped off a tire, and then we'd have a different crash to talk about.
Well, one thing that really wasn't talked about in the broadcast, and I'm not sure if you saw it there, but Bourdais almost went over.
Yeah, he was on his side. I mean,
Yeah,
it was like Mike Conway 2012.
Yeah, he was like Mike Conway 2012, or, Ed Carpenter, I would say.
Yeah. I think 2012 Ed Carpenter had a similar crash like that in qualifying.
Yeah.
Because I was there for that.
Which just goes to show you another wreck with the IR12 chassis that causes it to flip over. I mean, this is a fundamental design flaw with the IR12 chassis, which I don't know when they'll consider a new chassis for the series. Maybe another 5 years down the road. Hopefully they, get a chassis manufacturer that doesn't have that issue moving forward on ovals.
One thing that I've always wondered about that, the design of that car, is the reason that it tips over, is it because of the weight transfer? And, when you look at the floor of these things, and I guess the bottom structure of the car, to me it looks like that doesn't crush as much as the top part, like with the side pods. So for me, I wonder if it's more of, the suspension breaks apart, the side pod breaks apart, but it's the floor that doesn't give as much. I've always wondered that. I could be very wrong, but I've always kind of wondered that. Is that the case? But getting back to the Bourdais and Rahal crash, I personally thought it was racing until Seb gave him a hip check on the straightaway. When you're going 220 miles an hour, it's one thing to race a guy close. It's one thing to squeeze him going into a corner. But, when he's alongside you and you're kind of playing that chicken game with him, even if it was an accident, when you're running that close to a guy, even just running that close to a guy, you're kind of risking a lot in doing so. And he gave him a hip check and then turned in on him and ran into the grass. At that point, it's like 20 laps to go in the Indy 500. They're both in the top 10. You can't expect Graham to back out. You can't expect Bourdais to give Graham any room. I would have said it was racing all the way up until Bourdais hip checking him on the straightaway. And I know people would disagree and say it was racing deal. People would say Graham should have backed out. Others would say that, Bourdais turned in and he shouldn't have. But, that's the past. It's history, and it happened.
One thing that I will say that I was ticked off about was how they handled the caution period afterwards, wasting laps.
Yeah. I mean, the only thing that you can, the benefit of the doubt that you could give them is there's oil dry, and they're trying to dry, they're having cars drive through it to kind of disperse that so that it wasn't all sitting in one spot. But, I mean, I think we ran 7 caution laps after they lifted the red flag, 6 or 7. We went green with 13 to go. And the yellow came out with like 21 to go, I think.
It came out with... So it was 24 to go when it came out. I think they red flagged it after a lap. And to me, it was just ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. In the past, we've had it to where they said they were doing it to reorder the field for lap cars. Well, in the past, they've just picked up the cars whenever they're stopped on pit road and then reorder them manually so they don't waste time under caution.
Yeah. I think the only thing with that is you risk, if you're allowing the teams to jack the cars and move them manually, you got a lot of bodies down there. I hate to be that guy, but you'll risk somebody making an unapproved change because, of course, under the red flag, you're not allowed to work on the cars.
Well, yeah, of course, but
So you risk
but they've
that.
done but they've done this in the past though.
Yeah,
It's not
yeah. Oh, I agree with you 100%.
a past precedent. But that's all I have to say about the 500. Do you want to just brush over the F1 race? I mean, I'm not sure if you saw it or not.
I didn't get to see it at all. One last thought on the Indy 500. Perfect balance, at least for those weather conditions, for the aero package. Because you had, if you had the strong car, you can pull away. But if, late in the race where everybody's going for it, there was passing for the lead. It was exciting. Their aero push was still a big problem, but it was a good show, really good show. One of the best 500s, at least finishes in a while.
I agree with that.
So the F1 race, I didn't get to see that because I was on the way to Indianapolis and was sitting in traffic when that race finished up. But John, it sounded like it was a pretty good race.
Actually, no, it really wasn't.
Really? Okay, I'll say I watched the highlights afterwards, and the cherry picks, the cherry picks by F1. I was like, hey, this is pretty cool.
Well, the cherry picks were great. There were some incidents. There was another incident that wasn't mentioned in that video, but Sergio Perez almost killed two marshals coming out of the pit lane.
Really?
Yeah, they basically ran out in front of him, and he missed them by about a foot. Like, I have no understanding of why F1 just does it,
Okay, if it's a situation where you have to have any kind of marshals, and you could say this for any kind of racing, there's a situation where there's marshals out on the track attending to cars, even if it's just to get a car bump started or something. Yeah. You need a full course yellow. I know F1's all about keeping it green.
Or this virtual safety car.
Which is bogus.
Yeah, it is bogus. You have to reduce your speed by 80%. So, but if you lose any time, you have to maintain the gap too, and just no. It's
dumb. Just bring the safety car out. Who cares? This purist, and this is the purest of purist crap, if that makes sense. Like, who cares? If you have 2 more full course yellows in a race, who cares? Like, it's a safety problem. That's what it is.
Yeah.
If you've got stopped cars, on a street course, you don't have that much room to maneuver anyways. The F1 cars are obnoxiously big, especially for that circuit. They've almost completely outgrown that circuit. As small as it is.
They've outgrown most circuits, and I'm not sure if anybody saw, but there's a nice comparison. Somebody did a design or AutoCAD design and showed the differences, and just the cars are a little bit wider, not too much wider, but they're so much more longer.
Yeah,
than what they were in the past, and it's just crazy.
Yeah, I saw that drawing too, and I can't say anything else about it other than it's kind of a waste to have that much car. I mean, you think about it, that much more square footage, that's just more money.
And then there's also complaints about, there's no passing in F1 and this and that. And it's the ultimate technology thing. At some points, the ultimate technology should also yield really good racing.
Yeah. I mean, look at Formula E. Formula E is basically a spec series, but I mean...
But it is more
technology-wise, it's really cool.
Technology-wise, it's better than F1. I'll say that right now.
Yeah, I mean...
And that will upset some F1 fans. But no, getting back to the F1 race and why I just felt it was kind of terrible. So, Hamilton was out there on soft tires, which were the in-between compounds between... No, it was actually the softest compound. The soft tires were... I forgot, they kind of rebranded their tires last season because...
Are those Hypersofts or something?
No, so they did away with all the the brand naming on them.
Okay.
Basically, last year they would have been considered that, like a Hypersoft, but this year they're just considered soft, medium, hard because, 100 compounds was confusing people or something like that.
I'll be honest, yeah.
But So he was out there on the soft tire. The tire by Pirelli said it would last 50 laps. So Verstappen was on the medium tires, which were so much better than the soft tires, and he was basically running over Hamilton.
Well, he almost
But
did.
well, yeah, he almost did going into the chicane there out of the tunnel, but just couldn't get around him because every little gain that he would make, he would lose.
Right. Which goes back to the point where the cars are too big to pass there.
Yeah, and there was an issue with one of Verstappen when he was pitting, he was supposed to set his torque mapping, which I'm surprised this is even a thing. Just
Torque mapping.
Yes, torque mapping.
I can't imagine how many buttons and knobs and switches they have on that wheel.
I mean, you have to basically have a PhD in rocket science to understand an F1 wheel. But he actually, on the last pit stop, he hit Bottas because of an unsafe pit release, which, that kind of falls on the pit crew. I don't think that the driver should get penalized for that. That should go on the team, the pit crew. So he got the 5-second penalty for that, but he was supposed to switch it from 6 to 12, left it in 6 the entire time. And it was a small enough difference to where they think that that's what did him in the long run.
Huh.
But yeah, it's just ridiculous.
Yeah. And of course, Mercedes won again, so.
Yeah, which, at least it wasn't Mercedes 1-2. I will say that. At least it wasn't that. Yeah. But still, it was.
Saw a little bit of parity in the race, but not that much.
Yeah. I mean, going back to last year with F1, you had Danny Rick, which I love Danny Rick. Don't get me wrong, great personality for F1. But he was down almost 200 horsepower and won the race with 200 less horsepower. Which in any other racing series, if you were running 200 less horsepower, you'd be black flagged and told to go retire.
That's like Danny Sullivan, I believe it was Belle Isle in 1991. He won his turbocharger failed. He ran the rest of the race without that turbocharger, and I believe he held off Al Unser Jr. I can't remember, but I remember him telling that story that he lost his turbocharger and was down about 150 horsepower, I believe. Of course, again, on a street circuit, but was able to hold him off.
It helps, yeah. On a street circuit, it helps having that less power, detuning it a bit. But yeah, for sure, it was. I think, I'm not sure if you said this, but I think F1 has outgrown Monaco.
Yeah.
I think it's time for a reg change, at least with these cars.
Big time.
Shrink them down, make them not as wide. Take away the downforce. I mean, take it away. Underneath, such like that. Start regulating some of this stuff. Instead of having them change wings every week or have different specs of this and different specs of that. Say, you can have one update a year. One.
You could almost argue that they have more of a car problem than NASCAR does.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Sure.
We're talking all these problems that they have, and NASCAR, they've got one car, so they've got one car they got to worry about. They don't have 10 different teams to answer to.
Well, yeah, with NASCAR, you have. I mean, we complain about the Joe Gibbs and Penske dominating all the time, but at least there is some parity between different teams. That's all I got to say about that.
Yeah, definitely. So I will say, the Coke 600, awesome. Probably one of the best Coke 600s in a while. It was awesome.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I only got to see about 150 laps of it because I got home from Indy about 9 o'clock. But that was about as good of a Coke 600 as you could have possibly had, I think. It was exciting. Oh, yeah. They had the late race restart where they had David Reagan stay out. Newman took 2 tires. They were like 4 wide on 3 different occasions. It was awesome.
It was a 4 wide pass for the win. Which I like Truex's driver. I don't like necessarily a Toyota winning. That's just my bias, and I'll say that right now. I just don't like Toyota as a company. But it was an incredible, incredible feat by Truex to get by everybody four wide.
This,
Yeah, definitely the best 600 in quite some time.
yeah,
But my concern was, a lot of those early accidents and a lot of the accidents that we had were tire failures. Were tire
yeah,
failures.
yeah. And he was one of them, and he came back to win it somehow.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Joe Gibbs had a lot of tire failures
I wonder if it was a
this weekend.
camber problem for them.
Well, I imagine it was because all of their cars except for Busch and then even in Xfinity they had tire issues with
Yeah.
Chris Bell and yeah, it was just all
I
over the
mean,
place.
you would think it would be a setup thing if all the teams had that kind of an issue. Because remember Penske back at Phoenix in 2016, I believe it was. I think it was 2016. They had two or three of their cars lose a right front tire in an Indy car because they basically melted the sidewall because they went too aggressive on the camber. So
Yeah,
I wonder if it's something that to that effect. But
they probably did. They probably
yeah,
did. They going way too aggressive with it.
this was
But
probably really the first year in a long time that the Coke 600 rivaled the Indy 500 in terms of how good each race was. Because
oh yeah,
it's been a long
absolutely.
time since we've had a good Coke 600.
I'd say 2011. Well, no,
2011 is when they had an exciting finish.
yeah, with Junior running out, and then you had, of course, a couple years back with Austin.
2007.
No, I was going to say
Oh,
Austin Dillon winning,
yeah,
and Carl
fuel
Edwards
mileage.
winning the year before that with fuel mileage. I mean, there was some fuel mileage stuff. I mean, with stage racing now, there's no such thing as fuel mileage.
Yeah.
But yeah, overall, really good. I was surprised. 4 Hendrick cars in the top 9, with a
Hey,
fifth, in the top 9 with Chris Buescher.
they've subtly turned it around. Really from what I've noticed ever since Kansas.
Yeah,
I think wait, what was Bowman's three top?
Talladega, I would say. Talladega, the
Yeah,
momentum shifted for
that
them.
was the first top. Let's see, that was the first second place finish that Bowman had. Is that right? Or was it Dover?
It was no, it was Talladega.
Talladega. Okay, so I think that's really where it started. Yeah, you're right. Because Bowman had those 3 second place finishes. Almost every race since Talladega, they've had either 3 of their 4 cars in the top 10 or all 4 cars in the top 10, which
Yeah,
hasn't been something that we could have said in a long time. Just
no,
lack
not at
of
all.
lack of performance. Not even consistency. There's just been no speed. They've had maybe 1 or 2 cars on a weekly basis that can run in the top 10 consistently. Now that's changed subtly. So it makes you wonder how they're going to be looking for the playoffs.
Yeah, and we saw another strong finish by Jimmy Johnson. I think finally, Kevin Mendering and him are starting to gel very nicely
Yeah. Which
together.
that would have to be really hard. You look at all the drivers that have all these different crew chiefs throughout their career. We jump from team to team or even having different crew chiefs within a team. Jimmy's had the same crew chief his whole career. Since
Yeah,
2002, he's had the same crew chief. Now he's got Kevin Mendering this year. And yeah, they've definitely had some struggles, but they won their first race together, albeit it was a joke, it was a circus, but they won their first race together and they've consistently been improving. And I think that's what he needs.
yeah. Actually, I'm looking back at it now. This is the first time that Hendrick Motorsports has finished in the top, all of their drivers in the top 10 since Fort Worth Race 1 2016.
Really? Because I
Yes.
thought they had all 4 cars in the top. Maybe it was top 15. That's what I was thinking of. They had that a couple times this year.
Yeah, but top 10, Fort Worth, or Texas Race 1 2016.
Which in reality, that's hard for any team to do nowadays because there's so many competitive 3 and 4 car teams, and all it takes is a pit lane penalty or a crash or just a simple mistake to take you out of the top 10. So the fact that they did that was impressive.
Exactly.
So I think that's going to wrap things up on this week's episode. John, tell everybody where they can find you on social media.
You can find me at JSPoolIII on Twitter. Check out my gaming channel, JP3 Gaming. Be on the lookout for that in the next couple weeks. Going to try to revive that and see what the future offers.
Make sure you guys follow me on Twitter and Instagram at ZBuchanan4. Make sure you guys like my Facebook page at Zach Buchanan Racing, and make sure you guys subscribe to me on YouTube. Indy 500 vlog, that's coming. I don't know if that's going to be up by the time this podcast episode comes out, but going to be working on that as well. So make sure you guys check that out. Make sure you guys follow the podcast on Twitter at The Pit Limiter. Like us on Facebook at The Pit Limiter Podcast. And make sure you guys check us out on the podcast apps. We're also on YouTube, but the podcast apps, we've been having some technical difficulties with that the last couple weeks. We've been working that out to see how we can resolve that. So we apologize if you haven't been listening to us on Spotify or Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, wherever you can listen to us from on those apps. We apologize for that. But hopefully we'll have that resolved by the time this episode goes live. So that being said, thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see you next week.